Are China and the U.S. about to go nuclear? Believe it or not, there is talk by high-level officials on both sides about exactly that option. But they're not talking about ICBMs. They're talking about the nuclear debt bomb, and they both have the launch codes. Now, you don't have to get worried right now because it's not going to happen, at least not yet. In this article here, China could cut U.S. debt holdings in response to this threat here that I don't even want to say on YouTube anymore. U.S. News reports suggest White House officials have already considered the idea of canceling all or part of the $1.1 trillion debt that the U.S. owes to China. In response to the debate over the highly unlikely nuclear option, China could cut its holdings as the U.S. ramps up borrowing to pay for related costs to this thing right here. Now, I'm going to get into why they hold $1.1 trillion, why all of this currency was loaned to us. Ben Bernanke said they had a savings glut. It has nothing to do with that. He didn't know what he was talking about. Anyway, China may move to reduce its vast holdings of U.S. Treasury securities in the coming months in response to a resurgence in trade tensions and a war of words between the world's two largest economies over the origins and handling of the such and such thing, analysts said. U.S. news reports indicated that White House officials have debated several measures to offset the cost of this thing that's happening, including canceling some or all of the nearly $1.1 trillion debt that the United States government owes China. While analysts added that the U.S. was highly unlikely to take the nuclear option, the mere fact that the idea has been discussed could well prompt Beijing to seek to insulate itself from the risk by reducing its government debt holdings, U.S. government debt holdings. Now, they have a bunch of debt holdings, and as they mature, they get paid back, and those holdings go down, but there's a reason that you're going to see in a minute that they don't want that. So they always have to buy new U.S. Treasury bonds, notes, or bills. Those are the different durations of maturity. So they're constantly rolling them over to keep a certain level. You're going to learn why in just a minute. But it's crazy. It's such a crazy idea that anyone who has made it should really have their fitness for office reconsidered. We view this as largely a political ploy for Donald Trump's reelection, and a cynical one, because it would destroy the financing of the U.S. federal budget deficit, and it would. But any move to cancel the debt owed to China, effectively defaulting on it, would be counterproductive to the U.S. interests, because it would likely destroy investors' faith in the trustworthiness of the U.S. government to pay its bills, analysts warned. Now, our currency, all fiat currencies, are a confidence game. They require your faith in them for them to work. So it requires your confidence. A confidence game, there's a derivative of that called a con game. That's a confidence game. And that's exactly what all fiat currency systems are. I'll show you how part of that works in just a moment. So it would likely destroy investors' faith in the trustworthiness of the U.S. government to pay its bills. That means its bonds, which then means the U.S. dollar. It would undermine the faith in the U.S. dollar. This would send U.S. interest rates soaring, making borrowing more costly for the government, as well as U.S. companies and consumers, and in turn would strike a sharp blow to America's already very weak economy. Nevertheless, the news that the idea was discussed by top U.S. officials is likely to raise concerns among Chinese leaders about the growing risk of holding large amounts of U.S. government debt at a time when relations appear to be deteriorating rapidly. China could trigger a crash in the U.S. dollar and the financial markets by flooding the markets with U.S. treasuries for sale. That's their nuclear option. Our nuclear option is to say, sorry, we're not paying. Theirs is to just dump all of our IOUs on the market, which would push down U.S. bond prices and cause yields to spike. So the interest rates that we have to pay on the national debt, as the bonds that we've already sold become due, we have to roll them over, and we're always doing deficit spending, so we have to issue more. And all of those would be at much higher interest rates. But that would also ignite a global financial catastrophe hurting China as well, and it would. In the coming months, China could halt its treasury purchases. Now, I said they have to constantly roll these bonds over. So they don't have to dump any of the ones that are that they currently have. All they have to do is stop buying new ones from us, stop supporting our deficit spending, and stop buying pieces of our national debt, and you're going to see that in an upcoming video, to send a clear signal of its intentions. So all they have to do is stop purchasing new ones. If it decides to do that, it could make the actual sale of its other holdings, the ones it currently has, at a later date. So if they just stop and let their holdings start to slowly dwindle, they can always decide to pull out the full nuclear debt bomb option later. David Chin, founder of Basis Point Consulting, said China could be forced to toughen up its act if it no longer earned U.S. dollars from its exports to the U.S. because of a significant U.S.-China decoupling. This is why these trade wars that have been going on now for a couple of years, this is so dangerous. All of the trade wars that we're doing isolate us more and more from China, and how much stuff is actually made in the United States, and of the stuff that is made in the United States, how much of it has critical components that come from China. This could be just absolutely disastrous. I mean, just like an end of the U.S. dollar and the end of the economy. It's not going to happen, at least not yet, because we are both so reliant on each other. If that were to happen, China could sell its U.S. Treasury holdings for yuan, seeking to engineer a collapse in the U.S. dollar to end its status as the ruling currency. All of these countries all over the world have been getting so sick of the U.S. using the dollar as a weapon, and it has been now for quite a while. It's been the last decade and a half. We've really been using it as a weapon, and so they've been seeking alternatives and setting up alternatives. So the final bomb in this article, the final line. It's I die, but you die harder. I'm inserting but there. It's I die, but you die harder, Chin said. With no U.S. export market, China would go the other way and rely on internal consumption, trade with Belt and Road countries and the rest of the world in their local currencies, and prepare to eat bitter as local conditions worsen. That's in China. For the U.S., it would be unimaginable. Now, the way all of this works, here's China and the U.S., and the way the trade works between them is, if this is an old presentation, I think we developed this in 2013 for some of my live presentations. The last time it was updated, I believe, was 2016, but it still applies today. I gave this presentation, I don't know, a couple of years ago online, so it's out there somewhere in one of my videos. But a U.S. consumer wants to buy something, wants to buy an Apple iPhone from Walmart. The iPhone goes to the consumer. Walmart has dollars but needs more iPhones. They need to replace their inventory. They call up the manufacturer and order from Apple, and the plant that's in China sends over an iPhone, and now that Chinese manufacturer has dollars. The dollars are supposed to go into that Chinese businessman's bank account because he can't use dollars. He needs yuan to pay all of his employees and do all of the expenditures. So what is supposed to happen is he's supposed to put those, the bank is supposed to put those on the Forex and exchange them for yuan so that he's got yuan in his bank account. But if that happened, the dollar goes down, the yuan goes up, and Chinese goods become much more expensive in the United States, and trade goes back into balance. China doesn't want that. We want cheap goods from China. China wants full employment. So they don't do this mechanism that is supposed to be done that keeps things in balance. Now, if we were using something like gold, it would be impossible to do the following scenario. Gold balances all economies, and you can run a trade surplus or deficit for a short period of time, but then it's got to balance again. There's a reason for it. I'm not going to explain it in this video. Now, what is actually happening is the People's Bank of China buys the excess dollars that flow into China. And then they print brand new yuan that didn't exist before. They're not buying them off the Forex and deposit them in that businessman's bank account. So now he's got the yuan he needs. People's Bank of China has this glut of dollars. They go to the U.S. Treasury that issues a bond, which is an IOU, and they swap that bond for the currency, and everybody's happy. The U.S. Treasury, Washington gets to do a bunch of deficit spending with the dollars that were just loaned back to the U.S. government. So we get to run a deficit and spend those dollars that were loaned back to us. They were the dollars that we used to buy this stuff, but they get loaned back to us through this process, and then we do deficit spending with them. Now, this process continues and continues and continues, and what you'll see here is there's a buildup of bonds in the People's Bank of China. There's a buildup of dollars in the United States, the deficit spending. We get to do all of this deficit spending year after year. China helps to fund it through this process. But there's a buildup of yuan inside China, which causes raging inflation, and they have seen raging inflation over a number of years. But they also get to keep everybody employed. And we get a whole bunch of cheap stuff from China. So that's the process of how we get cheap stuff. But to do that, for us to get cheap stuff and China for them to be able to keep everybody employed, they have to build up this excess reserves of U.S. Treasury bonds and other U.S. assets as reserves at the People's Bank of China to suppress the yuan and keep the dollar up. That's the process. So moving on from that, on the radar, this is the Bitcoin halving that's coming up. By the way, the thing that you've seen on China, I'm doing another special report soon that's going to that'll show you some of the implications of that, because there's implications coming up very soon. The piper also always has to be paid someday. The bill always comes due. And so when you cheat the system, it just stores up energy. This is Bitcoin halving, but this isn't a chart of like a price or anything. This is the chart of the number of searches on Google for the term Bitcoin halving. So this was the first halving, and this is the second halving, and I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. But the searching for that term has gone way, way up, and it's projected to go much higher. Now, what the halving is the Bitcoin miners are running these supercomputers called mining rigs, and these are really powerful computers that have one function: to guess a number. So they're trying to solve a puzzle, but the puzzle is a very, very long number that they have to guess, and the chances of guessing this are extremely low. With millions of these computers running, guessing, is this the number? Is this the number? Is this the number? More than 1 trillion times every second. Millions of these doing trillions of guesses every second. It still takes 10 minutes for one of them to come up with the right answer. When it comes up with the right answer, that computer, which has also been busy building a block which has all of the Bitcoin transactions in it, is rewarded by getting to add its block to the blockchain. It gets paid a certain number of Bitcoins by the system as a reward. That is how new Bitcoins come into existence. And then all of the other computers that are doing the mining have to update to include the new block from the winning computer. So that's the process of doing that. Now, the winnings, the number of Bitcoins that you get paid, every 4 years, that gets cut in half. But something has happened every time that happens. The price runs up shortly thereafter. There's been a big price run up. So what you see here is the price ran up, and then there was this consolidation, this level point, and then there was the halving and another big price run up, and it exceeded its previous high. You got this big price run up and a high, and then you've got this consolidation and then the halving, and then it exceeds its previous high and this price run up. And these price run ups are spectacular. I said a long time ago that it wouldn't surprise me to see in the next Bitcoin run up for Bitcoin to top $50,000 per Bitcoin. It is possible. Now, here you have a price run up from the halving. So it was under $16, about $12 here. And the peak that it ran up to shortly thereafter was over $800. So from 12 to 800. Then with this halving, the price at the halving was under $800, and it ran up to $19,000. And so this is very powerful. Who knows if it'll happen again? It may not. But we're seeing this consolidation, and this is sort of an old chart. Bitcoin is back up to just under $9,000 right now. So it's interesting. A friend of mine, Trace Mayer, came to my house back in 2010 trying to get me into Bitcoin when it was pennies, and when you could just plug your computer into the wall and do mining and actually win Bitcoins with just a regular old computer. Now it takes a supercomputer that's dedicated solely to that, and you've got to be in a country that has subsidized power or buy into a pool where they're investing in buying mining rigs and installing them in a country that has subsidized power. But I mean, he came to me and tried to get me into this when it was pennies. And then in 2011, he flew to California and came to my office twice to try and get me interested in it. And I just didn't understand it. And here we're up at $3, $4, $5, $6. And then I finally, at about, it was 2014, it was about here. So the price was about 600. Actually, the first day that I bought, Bitcoin was just under 1,000. So it would have been here. It was in 2014. But I bought Bitcoins and I kept on buying all the way down to $250, and then turned off my accumulation as it started to rise. So I do have Bitcoin, but I am not an expert. So don't ask me anything about it. I know how blockchains work, and I know how distributed ledgers work. Go to somebody else. Trace Mayer is a good source. There's a guy named Chris Coney that runs Cryptoversity, and there's several others where they know a lot about cryptocurrencies. I really don't know that much, so don't ask me. It's just that if there's another one of these moves, it could be powerful. I want to welcome all of the new subscribers. Just the new subscribers, go back and hit that notification bell. We always appreciate a thumbs up. And go to goldsilver.com/free book and download a free copy of my book. Viewer feedback. Eric on Tech says, he's quoting Janet Yellen, "There will never be another recession in our lifetime." Enough said. Actually, he's not saying enough. I've called these people sometimes economic morons, that they just don't know what they're doing. But a lot of people believe they do know what they're doing, that this is actually a plan. Well, if so, then all the stuff that comes out, they're not only liars, but they're evil. Could it be that they're evil, lying, economic morons? Select all of the above. I don't know. I don't want to pick on them too much. They could just be inept, bumbling around, wondering what to do next, playing with all of our lifetimes, which really pisses me off. So the meme of the day. Paper money is liable to be abused, has been, is, and forever will be abused in every country in which it is permitted. Thomas Jefferson. Thank you for watching.